And there's a lot of reasons for this, so many that I don't think we could go over if we had like 5 hours. But one of those main reasons is a lack of affordable housing. Here's some more numbers regarding that. Sorry. From 1990 to 2016, the average cost of rent rose 20% faster than overall inflation, and average home price rose 41%. What this basically means is that while inflation was, everything was inflating at the same rate, the cost of rent was going 20% higher, which means people were making the same amount of money, but the cost of rent was not staying with that number. Next, in 2017, HUD found that only 37 out of 100 people who needed of extremely low income renters, that's what ELI means, there was only 37 available units for every 100 people who needed housing. And 90% of the new apartments constructed from 2017 to 18 were luxury units, which, as y'all probably know, are completely inaccessible to anyone who isn't like a bajillionaire. And then more than 9 million of ELI renters spend more than half of their income on housing and utilities. And that's just housing and utilities, which means they have less than half of their income left to spend on healthcare, medicine, school, transportation, work, food, literally everything else that you need to survive. Yeah. That's not the only factor, obviously. Here's a couple more, but by no mean at all of them. First, we have systemic racial injustice, and this is such a complex and deep-rooted problem that we could not cover all the points in a single hour. But good news, I will probably most likely be making a dedicated workshop on this topic. But just briefly, racial minorities experience homelessness at extremely disproportionate rates. Black people make up 13% of the US population, but 40% of the homeless population, which for obvious reasons is 1000% unacceptable. But next we have stigma. Stigmas against individuals experiencing homelessness prevent them from accessing crucial resources and opportunities. And what this basically means is labels like bum, drug addict, criminal, others would be demeaning words, are associated with people experiencing homelessness, and they pose an enormous social barrier when it comes to getting out of that situation. Next, we have high barrier social services. And so what that means is while resources exist to support individuals experiencing homelessness, these resources are often basically impossible to access. They require transportation, there's language barriers, they require documents, identification, specific legal statuses. But that's what MSP is for, and this is really what we're trying to accomplish with the Service Navigation Program. If you haven't heard about that, you should, and you should consider applying. But yeah, that's really what the Service Navigation Program is trying to do, is trying to help people navigate this system that for some reason is built to be as complicated as possible. But yeah, next we have affordable housing. We just went over that. Next, I think one of the most obvious ones that comes to everyone's mind is low wages. The current federal minimum wage is $7.25, which is ridiculous. That is nowhere near a living wage for let alone one single human person, or let alone for a family, which is what minimum wage is technically supposed to do. I think it's technically supposed to support like a household with 2 kids, which $7.25 really. And so we definitely need to do better about that, especially in San Diego when the cost of living is already way higher than in other places. Like, come on. And then next we have mental and physical health care. Oftentimes, a lack of mental or physical health care is the reason one might be experiencing homelessness. It can also be one of the biggest barriers for escaping homelessness. And healthcare is really one of those really intersectional issues that not only affect people who are experiencing homelessness, but literally everyone in this call. We all have mental health and physical health. We all have minds and we have bodies, and we would all like for those to stay healthy. And the resources to maintain our health is oftentimes difficult to access, especially if you're experiencing homelessness or a low-income situation. And again, these are just like 6 factors that I came up with just like off the top of my head. There's literally so many issues that need to be addressed to solve this problem. And I am by no means trying to discount any other issues by not including them. These are just the ones that I thought of off the top of my head. And so, really quick, if y'all don't mind, we're gonna have a quick discussion. And so the question is, what other contributing factors, systemic or not, are causes of homelessness? They could be any of the ones I discussed here. If you guys want to add on, if you guys come up with any others, I'd love to hear what y'all have to say. If no one volunteers, I will call on you.
Cecily, did you want to do that in the big group, or did you want everyone to be in a breakout room?
We can just do it in the big group.
Okay.
Anyone?
I think another factor could be unemployment. Like it's sort of related to everything else, but like there is like a really high level of unemployment right now.
Yeah, that's definitely one of like the biggest issues normally, but especially during COVID, I feel like the unemployment rate, as everyone has probably seen, is astronomically higher than it has ever been. And the lack of governmental stimulus is also frustrating. But yeah, does anyone have any other factors that they would like to share?
I think homelessness within the college community, I just looked it up. It says 21% of students at San Diego City College said they do not have a stable place to live. So tuition and just like expenses that come with trying to like get better jobs and like get out there, but at the same time it's like it's so hard and difficult for students specifically as well.
Yeah, no, you're completely right, especially since just going to school it costs like an arm and a leg. Like it's no wonder that students experience such hardship. It's actually something that I'm thinking about doing another dedicated workshop towards, just because I feel like it's pretty extremely relevant for all of us as we're in college. Does anyone have anything else you'd like to share before we move on? No? Alright. Alrighty, it's time for the juicy part, y'all. Or the part where I just talk for a really long time. So next we're going to be going over propositions and measures. These are policies on the ballots, local, both in the presidential election and in the general election that you might see on your ballots. If you're registered to vote in San Diego, that is. So first, if you live in the city of San Diego, there is Measure A. Measure A is a general obligation for affordable housing for bonds. If passed, it would authorize the city to issue up to $900 million of bonds with bond revenue going to fund low income, substance abuse, and mental health services and housing requiring an estimated property tax levy of between $30 and $21 per $100,000 in assessed value. Basically, what that means is that if you own property that costs more than $100,000, then you would have to pay this additional tax. And so if you voted yes for this, it would do what I just said. But if you voted no for this, this is an argument. So in all of these slides, I have a yes and a no category, and these are basically what supporters or non-supporters of each of these bills have said themselves. So like if my neighbor hates this bill, it's probably why. And so something that someone said was San Diego already has the highest property tax rate of the county, and too many working families are struggling with the high cost of living. In the midst of the pandemic, San Diegans can't afford a massive property tax increase. And the argument for this bill is this local investment not only allows us to address homelessness, but also provides affordable homes so hardworking San Diego families can afford to stay in our city. It'll also generate the local resources necessary to receive millions in federal and state matching funds that we currently leave on the table. And so it's kind of like do people want to pay taxes, or do people want to help people in unfortunate situations? Next, if you live in IB, Imperial Beach, there is Measure I, the Imperial Beach Emergency Response. And what this says is, shall the ordinance to maintain fire protection, paramedics, 911 emergency response prevention programs, neighborhood and community crime prevention, address homelessness, just all of those things, just, public services, and other general services by establishing a 1-cent sales tax, providing approximately 1.3 million annually until voters vote to end it. And so basically what this means is literally adding 1-cent sales tax to things you buy, and that would accumulate 1.3 million every year for the city of IB for all of the services listed up here. And so I couldn't find anyone that was against this bill, which I was surprised by. It's 1 cent. And so a no vote obviously would be to not implement this 1-cent tax. And the argument for Measure I is that it addresses public safety, homelessness, and traffic congestion challenges to keep IB a quality community to live, work, and raise family through the uncertain times ahead. Someone else said they don't know how long the effects of the pandemic will last. And so this will help IB stay self-reliant for any health emergency or any, unfortunate disaster. I know there's been a lot of fires lately, and that's kind of what a lot of the bills are centered around. But yeah. Next, the Valley Center Protection District. There's Measure AA, and that's to maintain improved local fire protection and emergency medical services, basically fire response and paramedics, and build a new fire station, replace old equipment in the Valley Center Fire Protection District by levying 6 cents per square foot of improved residential property, $49 per unimproved parcel with different rates for other property types, providing $820,000 annually for local use until ended by voters. Seniors and independents exempt. And so basically what that means is adding a varying property tax depending on what property you own. And that would accumulate $8,200,000 a year for local use for fire response and fire prevention. And so the arguments for this bill are the risks are high and growing. Experts tell us that the brain starts deteriorating for 6 minutes. Basically what they're saying is it takes like 5 minutes for someone to be completely, their life changed if they're in a fire situation. And right now the 911 response time for Valley Center is 10 minutes, which, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if it was faster, a lot more people could be, saved. And so in light of the recent fires, there's a lot of people pushing for this bill because, climate change is real, climate change is happening, and fires are how we are seeing it here. The argument against this bill is that Measure AA is another tax increase that will make owning a home in the Valley Center more expensive, which basically means we don't want to pay taxes. We don't want to pay more taxes. And those three were just three of the relevant measures that I could find locally. If you scan this PDF, and if you guys want, I can send out these slides later. If you scan this QR code, it'll take you to a PDF with the list of all of the measures in all of the cities of San Diego County. And they have brief little explanations of what they are. And if you click on the hyperlinks, they'll take you to like a pretty unbiased and pretty, if you ask me, pretty easy to understand analyses of the bills with all of the information regarding like why people support it, why people don't, the fiscal impacts, all that, boring stuff. But if you guys are interested, if you guys want to look into the measures on your ballots locally, I encourage you to look at that. Next, there's Prop 21, which you should all be seeing on your ballots. This is a statewide proposition for local rent control. And so a yes vote supporting this bill would allow governments to enact rent control on housing that was first occupied over 15 years ago, with an exception for landlords who own no more than 2 homes with distinct titles and subdivided interests. So what this means is that if you've been living in a place for over 15 years, if this bill is passed, then rent control can be applied there. And basically this is an attempt to prevent, obviously, gross increase in rent for someone who's been living there for a really long time. And a no vote continues to prohibit rent control on housing that was first occupied after February 1st, 1995. And so that's currently what's in place. Right now, you can't enact rent control on housing that was occupied on after February 1st, 1995. And something to look out for with all bills when you're voting for anything, if you're iffy, if you're confused about anything, is to take a look at who supports and who opposes the bills. If obviously, like, bills are wordy, they're hard to understand. Sometimes it's a shortcut, don't take it, but like it's interesting to look at. And so supporters of this bill: Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont, Maxine Waters, Dolores Huerta, the Democratic Party, and a bunch of California unions. The opposition, interestingly enough, the governor, Gavin Newsom, the Republican Party, AMVETS, the Conference of Carpenters, Ironworkers, and a bunch of other labor unions. Cool. And those were all of the propositions and measures that I could find that were relevant or slightly relevant to homelessness. I think there's like 15 propositions statewide. If you guys want to talk about those after, I'm down to do that. But for now, we'll get into the candidates that are running for public office. Before I get started on the candidates, I want to make a note that, just reiterate that, politicians aren't exactly known to be the most honest and truthful people, and what they say and what they put out there might not be what they act on. As dumb as that is reality. So please do your own research and remember that this presentation only covers homelessness. And while homelessness is one of the most critical issues in the entire world, it is not the only issue. And so really evaluate what you care about when it comes to voting. So for each of the slides here, under the title, I have a list of communities and cities that this district covers. And so, for example, district number 1 for the San Diego County Board of Supervisors covers, I'm not gonna read all of them, but Coronado through East Otay Mesa. And so in district number 1 for Board of Supervisors, Ben Hueso will be running against Nora Vargas. Ben has not really made any statements recently on homelessness. He said some stuff in like 2014, but I didn't really include anything that wasn't from at least post like 2018, just because people change. Some kind of relevant things that he has worked on are helping small businesses, protecting victims of domestic violence, working on prohibiting the sale of synthetic drugs, cleaning water sources, and stimulating the economy. Next is Nora Vargas. As for her, she made a statement on homelessness, and she said, "We have to strengthen our collaborative work and streamline access to resources and provide wraparound services. It is important that we create individual plans for our homeless population and remove the barriers that made someone become homeless in the first place. Additionally, we need to take the lead in addressing the housing shortage and skyrocketing rental prices. We need to preserve, protect, and produce affordable housing stock for young people, working families, veterans, and seniors on fixed income." These were all taken from their websites or from, like I said, like interviews, press releases that their offices made. Next, for District 2, for San Diego County Board of Supervisors, again, I have the list up there for all of these slides. Just if you care, just go through all that, make sure that or see if you're in their district, and if they are, pay attention. And so District 2, Joel Anderson is running against Steve Valls. For Joel Anderson, he says, "One of my top priorities is to bring more mental health and human services resources to help get mentally ill and homeless individuals the care they need to get off the streets. It is not fair to those who are suffering on the streets, law enforcement, or the communities where they reside, to continue to ignore the physically and mentally ill who need shelter and treatment." And then next is Steve Valls. And he says, "Homelessness doesn't respect city boundaries and we need to treat it that way. It is now a problem and it's a longer term problem. Let's get them into those hotel rooms, but we need to solve the longer term problem of transitional housing and permanent housing." But I think we're headed in the right direction. While I was doing research on Steve Valls, he's such like a random dude. He has like multiple Grammys and Emmys and was the mayor of like East something. East County, is that a city? It was East something. He was the mayor of that, and he has like a bunch of Grammys and Emmys in this picture. There's like a little Grammy there. I thought that was funny. That doesn't really have to do with his views on anything, but yeah. Next for District 3, County Board of Supervisors, we have Kristen Gaspar and Tara Lawson-Remmer. Kristen Gaspar launched the Other Side Academy in San Diego. The Other Side, on their website statement, or on her website, says the Other Side transforms the lives of the formerly incarcerated, those suffering from addiction, and those with mental health issues by bucking conventional wisdom and using accountability and programs that emphasize self-sufficiency rather than government reliance. Residents live in a drug-free home and learn to develop their strengths by helping each other, with a focus on changing negative behaviors through peer interactions. They learn social norms, build social skills, and become self-sufficient. So she started that program in San Diego. Next is Tara, and she says, we reduce homelessness by increasing housing first investments. And so if you guys aren't familiar with housing first, I think you are, it's usually something that we go over in training. Basically, that's the idea that before you get anyone into a program like rehab or a job or whatever the process is for getting out of homelessness for that specific person, you get them under a roof first. You get them in a house, in an apartment, whatever, before they start working on the other things. And the idea is that once you have a home, you could start working on those other things because you don't have to worry about food and you don't have to worry about the immediates. And so she says, increasing housing first investments, expanding shelter capacity, and decriminalizing homelessness. She says, I will create a 911 style 24-hour response team composed of social service providers to be the first responders on the scene when there is a call about homeless or mentally ill individual, so people in crisis can get immediate access to the social services they need instead of being locked up in jail. And I will increase the county's investment in mental health services and shelters with wraparound services so treatment is available for our homeless in need. Next we have sorry, when you want a PowerPoint, like the scrolling is in like the opposite direction. Cool. So next we're going to talk about the California State Assemblies. And if you're not familiar, I'll just explain it real quick. The California State Legislature is made up of the California State Senate and the State Assembly, which is basically, if you're familiar with federal government, Congress is made up of the House and the Senate. And so the California Legislature basically has the Assembly instead of the House. And so all of the House positions are up for election this year. And I will be talking about all the ones in San Diego County. So right off the bat with the 75th district, we have Karen Schwartz and Marie Waldron. For the ones that I could find, I put their parties next to them, so it would be for Democrat or for Republican. And I made a note if they were the incumbent, which means they are currently in office and they're running for re-election. And so for Karen Schwartz, she says we also need to create affordable housing closer to employment areas with decreased development in outlying, unincorporated, and fire-prone areas. The development that should be taking place in our exurbs should be locating large employers to the outlying areas where their workers currently live. Homelessness is a tragic social and health crisis that needs to be solved, and our healthcare system is in crisis. And then Marie says we must reduce the high cost to develop housing, including development and impact fees and the regulatory loopholes that add costs to the final price of a home. Rent control will not solve the housing crisis. I do not support mandates like rent control on private property in order to artificially keep rent low. The state solutions have been to house homeless without mandating that they go into treatment. This simply will not work. And right there, she basically said that she does not support housing first, which has been widely the approach that California has been taking. And so she does not support that. Next in the 76th district, and again, for all of these, make sure you look at the communities up top to see if you live there. Here it is: Camp Pendleton, Carlsbad, Encinitas, Oceanside, Vista. But for the 76th district, we have Tasha Border, Horvath, and Melanie Burkholder. Tasha is the incumbent, and what she actually did, she allocated $1 million towards homeless prevention, with $250,000 to each of the cities of Encinitas, Carlsbad, Vista, and Oceanside, for that purpose in the partnership with the CRC. And the CRC is like a local, I don't remember what it stands for, but it's like a city-specific task force or organization on like community relief. And then Melanie, on Housing First, she says, while this sounds charitable, the state does not require the homeless to accept mandatory mental health, sobriety, or job counseling, and truly fails to get fully beneath the underlying issues, which are the root causes of the plight of tens of thousands of homeless throughout the state and 7,300 right here in San Diego County. And so, again, Melanie does not support Housing First. I couldn't really find anything that said like what she would do. She kind of just said like, I don't like what we are doing. And then next in the 77th district, we have Brian. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but Brian M. And Julian Cutter. Brian is the incumbent, and he says there are different ways to address homelessness, including mental health treatment, support groups for individuals and their families, medication adherence programs, and free meals. If we are able to find a safe and secure housing for at-risk individuals, then services like mental health treatment can have a greater impact. By increasing the availability of supportive and transitional housing, we can help people get back on their feet. California can make progress on homelessness by empowering local governments with additional resources, providing flexibility, and extending programs to those who are disabled or battling mental illness. Something I found interesting that I noted down there was that he does not support rent control. And then running against him, we have Julianne Cutter. She didn't say anything, I couldn't find anything that she said about homelessness. This is her first time running for any public office, and her whole campaign is based on the idea, like in quotes, is what she said, giving the middle class a voice again. Her website's down there if you guys want more information. Next, we have the 78th district for the state assembly, and we have Sarah Davis and Christopher Ward, two Democrats running against each other. Sarah says, I support reallocating resources from law enforcement agencies to social service agencies with responsibilities such as assisting with homeless Californians and mental health needs. I support statewide standardization of use of force guidelines and demilitarization of law enforcement agencies. Ending institutionalized racism in all areas of public life is a top priority of mine, including but not limited to law enforcement, healthcare, education, and government policy. And quick note, the incumbent for this district already dropped out. And so next is Christopher Ward. He said, we must ensure that our neighbors are lifted out of homelessness and provided with supportive housing with the wraparound services to get them back on their feet. He's the chair of the Assembly Task Force on Homelessness. And so he says, as chair of the Regional Task Force on Homelessness, I have engaged to update systems of care, identify and secure funding streams, and increase housing supply for our most vulnerable San Diegans. I led the creation of the City of San Diego's first comprehensive community action plan on homelessness to make meaningful progress and hold our city officials accountable. And then next, we have the 79th district. And up here, there's like percentages because the way that assembly districts are divided up and how gerrymandering works is that assembly districts can be split up. So only like 36% of Chula Vista is in this district. So if you're not sure if this is your representative, it's pretty easy to just look up your zip code and it'll give you a district map and see if you're within that district. And so first we have Shirley Weber. She's the incumbent. She actually is a lecturer at SDSU, and I've seen her speak. She's dope, if I say so. And she said, those whose working wages are within the range of the middle class have difficulty finding housing that does not consume over the majority of their income. Southern California residents pay over half of their income in rent, and some as high as 60%. This makes housing, which is a necessity, a luxury for many, and thus the cycle of homelessness begins. One of the ways to address the homeless problem is to prevent it in the first place. We must work to prevent evictions. Working to keep people in their homes provides a necessary safety net and makes rebounding easier. And then next we have John Moore. No pictures of him exist on the internet. I looked so deep. I swear I looked for like 20 minutes straight and I couldn't find a single picture of this man. But he is the Republican running against Shirley. And he says, in the case the problem created by excess regulation leads to unaffordable housing, utility costs, including energy in the form of gasoline, are a component of housing affordability that is often overlooked. He also said, interestingly, the homeless fall into 3 categories: recently dispossessed women with children, veterans, and the chemically addicted, and hardcore homeless who have completely adapted to outdoor life. So take that as you will. I put that emoji there for a reason. Next we have the 80th district. And again, these percentages, just look up your district maps and you should be able to find it if you fall into them. Next we have Lorena Gonzalez, who's the incumbent, running against John Bogle. Lorena says, housing costs have risen astronomically during this housing crunch, but household incomes have not kept pace. We really need to get serious about confronting all of the factors that lead to the expansion of homelessness that is seen all over California, and then to also move people into housing to break the cycle. I believe in housing first model that has shown promising signs in places like Colorado, Boston, Utah. So she supports housing first, which is the idea I talked about earlier about first preventing it before someone's head, before asking them to do anything else. And then next is John Bogle. He said some interesting things. He said the priority must be focused on reducing the cost of new housing construction. The state needs to return to a promotion of the nuclear family as the bulwark against systemic poverty and homelessness. The surest way to fend off poverty and homelessness is to raise children in families with their biological parents. He said that, not me. Take that as you will. Yeah. Next, we're going to move on to U.S. representatives. And so this is your federal representative in Congress in Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives. And so first, there's the 50th district. And we have Amar Kampa-Najjar running against Daryl Issa. I think Amar is also a lecturer at SDSU. I haven't heard him speak personally, but that was on his website. And so he says, one simple way is to update HUD's funding formula so San Diego receives the 4th largest allotment of HUD funding rather than the 20th, commensurate with our needs as the fourth largest homeless population in the nation, collaborating with nonprofits and private investors through opportunity zones and HUD grant programs. Government cannot fix this problem alone. We must band together as a community to care for the least of these, providing emergency housing to the victims of domestic violence, and help make people whole again. And then Daryl didn't say much. I linked his website if you guys are curious about it, but the only thing I could find from him was he pointed towards the use of federal funds to support vocational training, which is, trade school, and also suggested looking into faith-based organizations for assistance, so like religious stuff. Next, we have the 51st district, and this district includes the entire border that the part that California includes. And we have Juan Vargas running against Juan Hidalgo. Juan is they're both Juan. Vargas says, what he's done, he sponsored a graffiti and home rehab program known as Operation Restore, which employed homeless individuals in an effort to clean up graffiti, basically. And then Juan Hidalgo has not made specific statements regarding homelessness, or I couldn't find any. Something funny on his website, it was like everywhere, it just said like, I am the Juan, and I thought that was funny. But he says one of his main issues on his campaign are to address the unemployment rate and border security. He really likes the border wall. Next, we have the 52nd district. Scott Peters against Jim DeBello. Scott Peters, the incumbent, advocates to update the HUD funding formula supports San Diego's housing market and expanding access to benefits and care. Those are his approaches to homelessness. And there was way more stuff. There's a whole PDF of stuff of other things he was going to do that I couldn't include. But if you scan that QR code in the bottom left corner there, it'll bring you straight to the PDF. And then Jim DeBello also has not made statements regarding homelessness recently, but his key policy areas are quote unquote draining the swamp, growing the military. I think he wants to build like 60 Navy ships, and wants to implement stricter immigration law. Next, we have the 53rd District with Georgette Gomez running against Sarah Jacobs. Georgette believes that it is outrageous that 500,000 Americans are sleeping on the streets every night. As city council president, Georgette has made affordable housing one of her key priorities. In Congress, Georgette will be a firm advocate for increased public housing assistance, federal grants for affordable housing projects, and expanding funding for Section 8 housing program. And then as for Sarah Jacobs, she says, push for HUD to modernize their funding formula, support federal programs that focus on preventing homelessness, such as legal counsel and providing emergency assistance in eviction courts. Support and co-sponsor the American Housing and Economic Mobility Act, which leverages federal funding to build new housing units for low and middle income families. We will also co-sponsor the Rent Relief Act, which would help individuals who live in rental housing and pay more than 30% of their income on rent. Wealth derived from housing is a major contributor to the racial wealth gap, so I support no or low-cost loans to families and individuals who live in formerly redlined communities. And then the one we want to this is the one you're all gonna see. The president, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump, who is the incumbent. I don't think I really need to say all of this. But off of Joe's website, he has a whole page dedicated to issues and how he's gonna approach them. And for homelessness, he says to invest $640 billion over 10 years, so every American has access to housing that is affordable, stable, safe, and healthy, accessible, energy efficient, resilient, and located near good schools with reasonable commute to their jobs. He mentions redlining, unfair housing practices, federal rental assistance, and a comprehensive approach. I don't really know what that means. I feel like people like to throw around the word comprehensive because it sounds fancy. But like, what does that mean? Next, we have Donald. So his signature housing initiative has been to repeal a rule requiring communities to build low-cost units in neighborhoods where it can relieve racial segregation in housing. He also threatened last year to crack down on homelessness in California by tearing down encampments and shelters, or sheltering encampments and sheltering the homeless in government facilities. Nothing happened. But I think we are all familiar with his antics by now. And yeah, those are the main positions of public office that are up for election. Oh, I forgot to mention, election day is November 3rd. Vote as soon as you can, especially if you're mail-in. But other public office positions that you might see on your ballot are mayoral. I know San Diego, the city of San Diego is having a mayoral election. Board of Education, and so what they do is they oversee and manage public school districts affairs, personnel, and properties. And then there's city-specific positions that include city treasurer, city clerk, city council, school board, and then judge of the Superior Court. And so what the Superior Court is the California court system. California has 58 counties, and each county has a trial court, and they hear civil, criminal cases. They're basically like the court, they do it. And judges that are elected serve 6-year terms, and they can run for re-election after that. And so if you see any of these positions on your ballot and you don't know what they are, look them up. Later on. But later on, I'll have some resources that'll help you guys get into that type of research. But yeah, if you guys, for some reason, want to talk about the people you see on your ballot, I'm down to do that. And set something up. That's pretty much it for what's going to be on your ballot: propositions, measures, candidates, city council, whatever. And so I really wanted to go over just like the general mindset that you maybe want to take when voting. It's really important to ask yourself certain questions, ask your politicians certain questions, and really evaluate what you believe, what they believe, or what they say they believe. Sometimes you can't trust like that. But some questions that I came up with to ask ourselves and our politicians on the issue of homelessness are: do you believe housing is a human right? What are your plans to create affordable housing? And then for questions on policy, whether you want to vote for or against a policy, does this policy adversely affect those experiencing homelessness, / does it benefit them? Do any homeless advocacy organizations endorse this person / policy, and why? Some people sometimes have sneaky, dumb reasons to endorse things. And then who wrote this policy and what is their legislative history? And those are just some of the ones that came off the top of my head. There's so many more. Speaking of more, we're gonna jump into another quick little discussion. And if y'all can come up with anything, what other considering factors or questions should we ask ourselves? Should we ask ourselves and our representatives when voting? And you guys can elaborate on the ones I mentioned here, there, or you guys can come up with your own. Anyone have anything to share? I can call on people. I have the power. I guess I will use my power. Let's see. Han, Lee.
So I guess it kind of has to, it's kind of more in detail about affordable housing because and I'm taking a real estate class right now, actually. So we talk a lot about how developers are mainly focused on profits and only profits and not really anything to do with like morals and ethics. So it's more about who's going to want to be developing affordable housing because a lot of developers are not going to want to look into kinds of affordable housing. And they're like, let's say, like, if you guys know about the sports arena development, they're trying to build like a multi-billion-dollar development, and it does include affordable housing and stuff, but there's a measure on the ballot that talks about like taking off the height limit for developments, and it kind of goes into, I guess, if anyone knows, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it'll hurt like the small businesses in the area and like the families that live there, their housing values are going to go down. So kind of like stuff like that I would want to get more into detail about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And going off what you said, something that I know in general when you're voting, or if you're iffy about someone, like you mentioned, there's like corporations and developers who have a lot of money, and they donate to campaigns and they donate to candidates, and so that's something pretty significant to look into if you're iffy on someone. Does anyone have anything else to share? Any questions? If not, I'll call on like 2 more people.
I guess just like seeing what they've done in the past to help homelessness and take that into consideration rather than like what they're saying right now. Maybe seeing like if they have been helping and making progress.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a really good strategy if you're iffy on someone to do research on their history and what they've supported in the past. And beyond what they've supported in the past, like what bills have they actually passed? Like which ones have they written? Which ones have they co-wrote? What are their key issues? What do they talk about the most? And what have they actually physically done and put into the world to help the things that you care about? And then almost done. Right here, real quick, I have a couple of voting resources that I personally really like. First, I have Ballotpedia. It's an encyclopedia. It has literally every single thing you need to know about the election. It has dates, parties, candidates, where's your polling station, how to vote, absentee voting, voter ID. It gives you basically all of the information I found on the slides with the measures and the props came from Ballotpedia. They're completely nonpartisan, not biased, and it's just like what is the actual stuff. And the next is Vote 411, which was created by Lennon, that compares candidates' positions side by side, and basically you can filter by where you are and whichever candidates are on your ballot. And so you can select like Joe versus Donald, and then there will be a list of questions or a list of positions that are either direct quotes or statements, like in this presentation, made by themselves. So that's also completely nonpartisan, unbiased, and that's a really good resource if you just are torn between two people, if you're curious like how they compare regarding different issues. Yeah, that was the last thing that I had to say. If anyone has any questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, compliments, thoughts, I'd love to hear them. If y'all have any input on how I could make the next one of these trainings better, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Anything anything fun that you learned today?
I think it's awesome that Dr. Shirley Weber is running, and like, wasn't she with the 76th district last year?
Yeah, she's been in that position for like, I think at least 2 or 3 terms. She's the incumbent, and I honestly don't think she's going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah. She's really powerful. And like the way she speaks.
Yeah, I've heard her speak a couple times at SDSU and also at like other local things. Yeah, she's really awesome. Anything else?
I think you presented the information in a very like unpartisan way, and I know that's really hard to do sometimes, so good job.
I tried. Some people are stupid, so I had to like tell you, but whatever. But yeah, if no one has anything else to share, thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for listening to me talk about politics for an hour. If you guys have any questions, that is my email. I'm in the group meet. I have a phone. I have all of the things. If you would like to contact me, feel free to do so. But yeah, if there's nothing else, I will hand the floor back to Rose.
I think we should give like a round of snaps for Cecily. That was amazing. She really put all of that together. That was, again, flawless. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and present all the information. I could not tell it was your first time running a workshop. So again, that was amazing. Thank you again so much. I will pass it off to Rose again in a minute so she can reiterate some of the announcements since some of you joined later. I do want to give a special shout out, Alan. I think I've seen you on social media about your little cutting your hair and your mohawk. So again, that's awesome. I know you really helped your cohort team just max out. Rose was talking about this morning, so that's really cool. But go ahead, Rose, tell your announcements. And thank you all for coming, especially on a Friday night. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and wear a mask.
So just very, very briefly, we have just a shout out to our cohort groups. The Roots, the Money Team, and as well as Paula's group, y'all have all raised over $150 already, and we've only had the community relief fundraiser going for about a month. So honestly, great job. Next week, we're also going to be having a game night social. It's going to be Among Us themed, so come through. It'll be a lot of fun. Come find out which one of your general members is sus or is the imposter. Also, just a reminder, we still need a couple more a couple more people to register for our fundraiser. I will go ahead and resend it in the chat, but if it takes like 2 seconds just to like fill it out, if you could. Yeah, that is all that I have. Thank you so much everyone for attending tonight. But that's all I have. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great rest of your weekend, and stay safe out there. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Cecily.